It's 6 p.m. Eastern. It's time for the Daily Wrap. And welcome to the show, everybody. I'm Joe Concha, joined by my co-host and Dungeons & Dragons aficionado. Wow, that's a tough game. Forbes columnist Rick Unger is here. Also, she's one of Philadelphia's top attorneys and quickly becoming the most coveted TV pundit on television as well. Heather Hansen took time out of her busy schedule to see us. And finally, Newsmax contributor, editor of the Wisdom Daily, and the guy who will be heading to BB's all-exclusive, all-weekend victory celebration at the Hummus Hotel on the Dead Sea. Good for you.
That's me.
The Rabbi Brad Hirschfield, everybody.
I didn't
wow.
get my invitation.
We'll get it to you.
Okay, I see.
Yes, it's time
After
for
it's
the
over.
Daily Download. And yesterday, Benjamin Netanyahu did something many thought was impossible, struck a clear and decisive victory in his bid to continue to be the Prime Minister of Israel. Early exit polls had Bibi narrowly leading, but when everything was said and done, the Likud party easily cruised to a win, keeping Netanyahu in place and picking up 30 seats in Parliament. Weren't expected to get that many. Analysts are pointing to the Prime Minister's slide to the far right in the remaining days of the election that helped him lock down the votes, even though he won by a pretty decisive victory, so maybe he didn't even need to do that. The White House was excited by Netanyahu's win and took to the airwaves to congratulate him.
Given all the tension between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Obama in the recent weeks and months, is it fair to say that there is not a massive celebration happening at the White House this morning with this news?
Allison, we want to congratulate the Israeli people for the democratic process for the election that they just engaged in with all the parties that engage in that election. As you know now, the hard work of coalition building begins. Sometimes that takes a couple of weeks, and we're going to give space to the formation of that coalition government, and we're not going to weigh in one way or another.
Okay, that would be incorrect. Apparently nobody in the administration was very excited about Bibi's win. And liberal columnists and publications, well, they're downright furious. Today in the Daily Beast, the wonderful Jonathan Alter penned, like George W. Bush in his 2004 re-election campaign against John Kerry in the aftermath of 9/11, Netanyahu wielded security issues as a polarizing political weapon, overcoming personal unpopularity and a mediocre economic record with a campaign based largely on fear. It worked. Good Lord. On Twitter, it seemed as though some users' head might explode over the news. Take a look at some of these. That racist pig, Netanyahu, wins 27 out of 120, which means 22.5% of the vote. Watching him in his pomp, you'd think he'd won by a landslide. And here's another nice tweet. Dear Netanyahu, God hates you. And how about the tweet from this chap? Yes, yep, screw Netanyahu. He's a warmonger and brings back apartheid against Palestinians. Learned wrong lesson from World War II. Rabbi, are you surprised by the reason? Well, forget the tweets.
Well, first, I'm horrified by the tweets. God hates you?
Yeah,
there's no bad track record of people saying that in the world. I mean, that's actually shameful behavior. Look,
You should see some of the tweets I get.
I won't go there. Here's the thing. Democracy actually worked here. That has nothing to do with whether I like the results. The third most popular party in this election that did elect Netanyahu, did move way to the right in the last days, was the United Arab List. So that is democracy in action. It may be a little bit weird, and I may be a little personally disappointed, but I'm not at all surprised by the results for two reasons. First of all, hope is far harder to mobilize than fear is. And the Prime Minister did mobilize a great deal of fear in the last days of the election. And he proved once again that that's easier to do. I'm disappointed by that, but that is what it is. The other piece of this is that, ironically, the President and this administration that were so opposed to him becoming Prime Minister, I think actually contributed to his ability to mobilize fear and win. The fact is, when someone is frantic, and if you think the Prime Minister was behaving in a frantic way, and we all know it in our lives, the last thing you do is say to a frantic person, calm down! It doesn't help.
Rabbi,
and that's exactly what they did. And by doing that, they played into the precise fears that he was able to mobilize successfully.
Are you
to win.
furious by the result?
Am I
Furious.
Furious? No.
You don't seem furious. And so I'm wondering why Jonathan Alter was just defined as furious when you just said exactly what Jonathan Alter wrote. You guys completely agree. So that's kind of my point. I think we're kind of mischaracterizing some of this. The White House did not outright congratulate Netanyahu because he is not the new prime minister yet. He's certainly going to be, but he wasn't yet. And that's why, no, he didn't win. If you understand the parliamentary system, you know that he got 30 seats in the Likud out of 120 seats.
Will he be prime minister a week, a month, a year from now?
Likely
So
he
he
will.
won.
No, he did not win, and you mislead the audience when you say that.
Had I been there, I wouldn't have voted for him, but
I really like
you're
to
right,
make it
Joe.
clear.
He won.
I think it's important.
But the Prime Minister of India called and congratulated him. Cameron, the Prime Minister.
So make that point. But it's not that
so.
he won because he didn't win.
But
So forget win, not win. Here's what the administration does need to know.
I'll just keep my point to myself.
They're contributing to the ascendancy of a person they say they disagree with. And the longer they play into that feeling of isolation, the more they're going to get exactly what they say they don't want. And that happens so often in life. We end up going after what we think we want the wrong way, and then lo and behold, we get the exact opposite of what we claim. The thing they should have done, precisely because they believe what they believe, is offered the warmest possible congratulations and said, and we look forward to working with you. That's how you dial back the fear and the rage that they think he operates from, whether it's true or not.
Heather, even in this country, when there's a winner and there's a loser, the loser calls the winner and says congratulations. In this case, obviously, President Obama was not running against Netanyahu, even though it felt that way to a certain extent.
Right.
And the president couldn't even pick up a phone.
Well, and he picked up the phone to call heads of state when it was Turkey, when it was Egypt, when it was Russia, when it was a whole host of other places. It really doesn't speak very well of President Obama's willingness to see people on the opposite side of him and reach out a hand. And we see that here, and now we've seen it internationally as well. Now, fortunately, the bonds between the intelligence and military of America and Israel are very, very strong. And that's really the important bond here. The bond between the leaders, although it would be great if it was better, it's not as important as those others.
Rick, is putting the security of Israelis first, as Netanyahu, that was always the centerpiece of his campaign, is that selling fear, as Jonathan Alter described?
Well, not only is Jonathan Alter described, as the rabbi just described, and that's precisely what Netanyahu did in the past few days, was sell fear. But
So there should be no fear of Iran, who said they'd wipe them off the map?
If anybody will let me finish this point without jumping all over
Okay.
me. You
It's yours.
just,
You got 20
just
seconds.
named a bunch of countries that are not parliamentary systems. They do not vote the way Israel did. So can I just inform the audience correctly? Because I don't. You're not going to let me finish. So you just go ahead and say what you want.
We
I just
have to.
won't say
We have to
anything.
go. So we have to end it on that lovely note. Coming up next, it looks like the GOP has another man running for president. In 3 minutes, we'll tell you who that is. It's deja vu all over again. This is the Daily Wrap, and it's only on Newsmax TV. And welcome back to Daily Wrap. I'm Joe Concha, along with Rick Unger and Heather Hansen and the Rabbi Brad Hirschman. So today, Donald Trump made headlines when he announced he would not be hosting The Apprentice this season after the big ratings and the big win by almost Geraldo. Who won it? Lisa Gimmons, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, but instead, he will be launching, get this, surprise, a presidential committee. Okay, an exploratory, as it were. A not-so-humble Donald, in a statement today, said, quote, "We must rebuild our infrastructure, control our borders, select local government of education, greatly strengthen our military, care for our veterans, and put Americans back to work. We must stop other countries from totally taking advantage of our representatives." It's like an imitation of McLaughlin and Trump combined. I'm going to stop doing that.
Exactly right.
Who are being outnegotiated at every turn. I am the only one who can make America truly great again. Here is the Donald back in February at CPAC discussing why he could run.
It's very hard for a person like me to run because I have a lot of things happening. A politician, they run. What do? They run, they lose, they win, they run. With me, I give up a lot when I do this. I already told the Apprentice people, you know, NBC wanted to renew, and I said, I'm doing something else. It's very important to me. I'm doing something very important. So I'm looking at it very seriously. I don't want what happened to Mitt Romney to happen again, because that was a tremendous blow for this country.
So what are the polls saying about Trump? Nothing really good. Last week's NBC Wall Street Journal poll found that 74% of GOP primary voters couldn't see themselves supporting him. Ouch. Rick Unger, I know you have a rule against this sort of thing.
I
Not
have
to
to
discuss
talk about Trump.
but you are a pundit, and therefore it is our segment. So what do you think?
I really hope he runs. You know why? You know what else he has to give up beyond The Apprentice? He has to give up his financial records. He has to give up the records of all those companies he's bankrupted for them, I believe. I hope Trump runs. I think it'll be the greatest thing in the world to see. Let him get in there with the real big boys of politics and find out what a PR putz he really is.
But how do you really feel?
Let me ask you a question, Heather.
yeah.
Have we been suckered again into falling into even covering this
Yes.
story because this guy does attract attention, he gets clicks, and he's interesting to a certain extent because he's brutally candid, yet here we are talking about it. Are we just suckers?
I think so. In fact, Politico reported that NBC News had no comment when asked about whether or not he had renewed on The Apprentice, and they did say that they plan to renew the show and with a to-be-determined date. So either we are being suckered, or they just don't figure he's going to go very far, or they plan to maybe use his kids. But it seems to me that this is a way for him to sell more books and get more people talking about him, and not so much that he's actually going to see it through.
So if you're Donald Trump, okay, just for
That's
a
a
moment.
scary thought.
Right, the hair is different, but I could see some similarities.
Thanks.
Why do you do this? In other words, I understand it brings more attention to him and he's able to sell more stuff. How many yachts can you water ski behind? How much is enough? He doesn't need to brand himself or get more attention to himself anymore. Why go this route when he knows he's not going to do it?
Because once you're Donald Trump, the sky is never high enough. Because when you're the guy who says, I am the only one who can save America, I don't care what your vision of America is. If you think you're the only one, you're not a candidate, you think you're the Messiah. And political messiahs, right, left, or center, have really bad track records. But they're always the last one to know it. He has no idea when you ask him intelligently, how many boats can you ski behind, the Donald? He goes, me? When you're as big as me? They don't have enough yachts for me yet.
But he has no intention of running. It's not like he has a messiah complex because he thinks he can solve problems. It's about attention.
I don't know. That's what's really profound about this. Rational people like us say, pure ploy. What makes any of us think, based on his behavior over the last 2 decades, we're dealing with a rational actor?
Here's everything you know. You'll appreciate this because you cover a lot of media. The last time he went before the press at the television, where they all get together to talk TV shows, the first thing he said was that The Apprentice was the most popular show on TV. A reporter said, no, Mr. Trump, that's really not true. He says, well, it's the most popular show on TV in 18 to 49. Well, they said, well, Mr. Trump, that's really not true. They said, well, it's the most popular show on Monday nights. This is what he kept doing. Yeah. And they said, well, that's not true. He says, well, that's what they told me. This is Donald Trump. Right. He just makes stuff up.
Now, let me play contrarian for a second. In 2012, there was a point where he actually was leading Mitt Romney and everybody else.
Only in the Republican polls.
No, that's what I mean.
Because Democrats aren't that stupid.
That's the point that I was going to make, though. When you go through the list that we showed, the things that he talked about, he wants to build up the infrastructure, he wants to close the borders, he wants to increase spending for the military. These are all things that a lot of people can get behind. If someone else were giving that list of what he wanted to do, what she wanted to do, when they became president, a lot of people could get behind it. But it's because of his ego issues, it's because of his history of being an SNL skit that he just has no credibility. But when you read that, it is consistent with what many of us want to see in a president.
Okay.
I think the thing to watch is that in the end, he does those talking points. They're reasonable for a lot of people, desirable for many people. Right. But it turns out the only flesh he can put on those bones is, we're not dealing good at the table. So the guy who did the art of the deal would reduce the world's only superpower left, most important force for decency and democracy on the planet, to one more deal on a building. I mean, the whole thing is a joke. It doesn't even matter if you agree with him. To take him seriously is really
buildings he doesn't even own, but claims to own because he licenses his name to the people who really own the buildings.
Just like his show.
So we have 60 seconds. Let's have a little fun. How is this going to play out exactly? Let me give my theory first. He does the exploratory committee, then somebody asks for his financial records, as you brought up, Rick, and then he says no, and then he finds a candidate that maybe he really likes and can back, and then he backs out. That's my scenario. Yours.
I can buy that. I think that's very realistic.
Okay.
Yeah, I can buy that.
I think he wants to be a player, so that's how he does it. He has someone that he can back. He can say, put in his support for that person and still feel like he's a player.
That's it. Make him dance around him. And the key is what Rick said. It's none of your business. I'm above that. And that becomes his way to back out of it. Me share my records with you people? Are you kidding? I'm the Donald. Done.
Wow. Maybe he's positioning himself for a cabinet position, like Secretary of the Treasury, or
I think if you said that to any of the real candidates, they'd get a good giggle out of that.
or Secretary of the Interior, because he has very nice hotels. No one's going to argue that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he's
Secretary-
going to
So
have a
interior
hard
design, maybe.
That's my YouTube
He'd
moment.
have a hard time arguing against giving his documents, given that he makes such the birther claims, and trying to get birth certificate. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that just
He
puts
lost
him
a
over
lot
the
of people
edge.
with that.
Yeah,
That's-
puts him
that's-
over
And he
the edge.
also lied. Go figure. He said that he sent somebody over to Hawaii to check it out. Nobody ever went to Hawaii from him to check it out.
Yeah.
He lied.
I'll take the
Anyway, we have to mercifully end this segment. Anyway, coming up next on the Daily Wrap, guess which White House administration is one of the least transparent in history? I'm sure you know, but we'll be talking about it next anyway. This is the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax TV. Oh, time to clear.
The way to make government responsible is to hold it accountable. And the way to make government accountable is make it transparent so that the American people can know exactly what decisions are being made, how they're being made, and whether their interests are being well served. The directives I am giving my administration today on how to interpret the Freedom of Information Act will do just that. For a long time now, there's been too much secrecy in this city. The old rules said that if there was a defensible argument for not disclosing something to the American people, then it should not be disclosed. That era is now over.
Goodness, I barely recognized him. That was our commander-in-chief.
Who was that masked man?
Back in 2009, a masked man that apparently had much darker hair than he does now.
Yeah.
And that was him back in 2009 discussing one of the pillars of his presidency, government transparency. Welcome back to the show. I'm Joe Concha, along with Rick Unger, Heather Hansen, and Brad Hirschfield. The president continued to tell America that his administration is the most transparent in history.
Track record of transparency. I'll make our government open and transparent. We'll do it in a transparent way. I want transparency, I want accountability, so that the American people can be involved in their own government. Let me say it as simply as I can. Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency. This is the most transparent administration in history.
We need more transparent quotes. That was all problem with that whole soundbite. Anyway, well, something happened since 2009 because the president just broke a very special record. According to a new analysis of federal data by the Associated Press, the Obama administration set a record again for censoring government files or outright denying access to them last year under the U.S. Freedom of Information Act. Here are some of the highlights. In nearly 1 in 3 cases, the White House decided to withhold or censor records were improper under the law. More than 200,000 record requests went unanswered last year. That was up 55% from the previous year. The administration responded to 647,142 requests, a 4% decrease from the previous year. So Heather, the president and his press office continue to defend themselves, saying they are transparent. Do they just think Americans are dumb or not paying attention?
Listen, what they do is they manipulate the data in certain ways to say that in certain ways we are actually more transparent. But the thing is, when they do that, they really do us a disservice. They don't include, for example, the visitor logs, which show who has come to visit the White House. Mm-hmm. Instead, they go and meet people at townhouses or at cafes nearby. And so that issue, they have definitely manipulated the data. When it comes to this specific data, they don't count information where they say we just lost that. If they just lost it, then it doesn't count as not having been responsive. The problem with that is that we know with the IRS, there's a lot of stuff that gets lost and then it gets found and then it gets lost again. So there's a lot of, anytime you use statistics, there's ways to manipulate it either way. But I think it's very clear that this White House is one of the least transparent White Houses that we have had.
Brad?
I think it's very simple. They've confused transparency with accessibility. They have done a whole variety of things that on the front end promise and actually sometimes deliver greater accessibility into the documents of government. But in the end, it's no more transparent. If I show you more of a limited view of something, you still have the same limited view. And so I think that's what they did. I'm not judging the intent. But the reality, and it happens a lot in our culture of internet communication, all kinds of other stuff, the promise of greater access does not mean greater insight or transparency. And whether it was done purposefully or not, I think that's where we are with this administration.
Rick, are you surprised there hasn't been more blowback from the press, even though obviously some are friendlier to Democratic administrations, but that we've heard some rumblings from the White House press corps specifically, but not really a big story.
It depends on the issue. Look, one of the problems here is when you make a statement that you're going to be the most transparent in history, can anybody tell me how transparent the Madison presidency was, or if you take the Adams father and son and divide them by two, were they more or less transparent? So right there, you know, the truth is it's very much a mixed bag. You know, if you're looking for the plus side, I actually brought a chart along, maybe we'll put up, which basically shows that when it comes to classifying data, you see that the administration has been very, very good. They're not originally classifying new data. On the other hand, they have been really on the high end of that scale when it comes to old classified stuff that they reclassify. Heather's right when she talks about the logs. They've gone out of their way not to be transparent with the visitors' logs. So it's really a mixed bag, and I suspect at the end of the day, none of them are more transparent than the others. None of them are less transparent than the others.
I remember in 2008 specifically, it wasn't so much Obama versus McCain. It was Obama versus Bush. In other words, the Bush presidency, they're secretive. They lied about weapons of mass destruction.
They were particularly bad on this topic, I got to say, when it comes to transparency. There are others who've been better. Clinton actually was probably better than Obama.
Ironically.
But the Bush administration actually pushed a lot harder for secrecy.
So I think Rick's right. If they didn't aim for that high bar and just say, we'll be more transparent than these guys were, then no one's talking about this now.
So that maybe some of it was just being naive, but there's also, I mean, he has pursued more whistleblowers under the Espionage Act than any of the other administrations combined.
That's
so
true.
there's a problem here.
And he hasn't been very good with the press.
And those images were all, he was very young, right? I think he learned on the job. It's harder to deliver when you're in the Oval Office.
That's certainly true. The difference between your 40s and 50s is quite scary, but I don't have to worry about that for decades. Anyway, potluck time next. This is the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax TV. And welcome back to the show. It's potluck time. This is the part of the show where we go around the table and share our favorite stories of the day. Heather Hansen, what did you cook up?
Well, we all know we're waiting on Loretta Lynch's potential confirmation as the new head of our legal department here in the United States of America.
I thought you were going to say the Country Music Hall of Fame. Loretta.
Thank you.
Proud to be a coal mine.
Loretta Lynch.
Yes.
But today, the Senate Minority Whip, Dick Durbin, said that she had been put in the back of the bus when it comes to this nomination. And I found that offensive, and I found it ridiculous. If you look into Senator Durbin's history, he actually did not vote to confirm Condoleezza Rice, and no one accused him of being a racist. There are times where the Democrats have not confirmed African American women to be judges in the D.C. Court of Appeals, and no one accused them of being racist. So to bring this back to that issue yet again is something that is bad for our country, bad for this process. We'll talk, I think, in Rick's potluck about why there has been a delay, but to make it about that when it clearly is not is a disservice to the process and to our country and to what we're trying to do with race relations consistently. We just keep going backwards. It's ridiculous.
Brad, what an appropriate first name.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, I completely agree. I think that on both sides, the confirmation process has become wildly politicized. No one is well served by it. But this was particularly gross. The truth is, we have a lot of real issues about race in this country to deal with. And for someone who sits in the Senate to now play the race card on this is so wrong, because it actually undermines many of the things that Durbin supposedly is committed to. It makes it harder. It's exactly what goes on that makes it impossible to address the real issues of race. It's just wrong. This is why people have no confidence in the guys on the Hill.
Yeah,
this is why.
I'm going to agree too. It was a really, really bad choice of words, and maybe worse than that. I'll go that far. I'm not happy with the way she's being treated in this process. It's been 6 months, but he should not have gone there. I completely agree.
And it does for people who aren't able to spend all day reading this stuff and following up on it. That's all they hear, and they believe it, and then it just makes it so much worse. And we're trying so hard to fix it. And I think it goes back to what we talked to once before about our race relations worse under this administration, and for reasons like this.
I think we should go to Starbucks and talk about this.
That's a good idea.
wanna
Put
do
a
that?
little race
There
relations
you
on
go.
the cup and get it
A
on.
lot of people agree with him. Now, if we're all in agreement that this is horrible, liberals, conservatives, whoever, then will he actually apologize, Dick Durbin? Or is he the type that just say, hey?
I don't know.
I don't know, and I think that maybe he'll just hope that it passes. He's not the first to say it in one way or the other. It's been on CNN. They've talked about that it's a racial thing, and I just don't think that it is. And I think that to put it that way is just wrong.
Well,
And
there's a
he's
reason.
probably not going to get in trouble with his crew.
Right.
But it is wrong.
And that's part of the problem. He
And that's
won't
part
get in
of the
trouble
problem.
with his
I
crew.
agree.
It's not from the outside. The critique should be from the inside.
I agree.
The tragedy here is if he did apologize, if he went the other way and said, you know what, it came out, I'm angry, the process is overly politicized, but what I said was stupid and wrong, he could actually do as much good for race relations as he's now done bad. It's up to him.
And that's the last word. Rick, you're up next.
Yeah, it kind of dovetails in a way because there is a bill that was passed unanimously in the House. It's an anti-human trafficking bill. Well, you would think who could be against the anti-human trafficking bill? Well, it turns out all of the Senate Democrats, with the exception of 4 of them, but there's a reason for it. Nobody in the House on the Democratic side apparently read the bill, because had they read the bill, they would have seen that there's abortion language in there that takes the current state of the law, which is that taxpayer money can never be used for abortions, and it extends it just a tiny bit further, because what this bill does is it creates a fund, the money of which doesn't come from the taxpayers, it comes from those who engaged in human trafficking to help out people who have been trafficked. So it would take it that little bit further. Well, the Senate Democrats apparently did read the bill, except for Harry Reid, who originally was for it before he was against it, and has said, no, we're not going to vote for that. Well, now what's happened is the Republicans are using that and using the Loretta Lynch nomination. They're holding it up now saying, well, we're not going to vote on it until we get past this human trafficking bill. So you have a real mess on your hands here. That's wrong. That's not the way you should do it. The woman has been waiting for an up or down vote since November. If you want to vote against her, that's the prerogative of the Senate, but vote. You don't mix it up with this. Will we ever get to the point on either side where we're not playing these stupid politics games?
So what I don't get, why hold up this nomination when the alternative is Eric Holder,
telling you.
who they feel is the most
Who they
polarizing
Yeah, but
attorney
they've
general
fallen in
history?
love with him. They don't want him to go.
But I don't-
Who knew?
I disagree. I've heard people say that. People keep saying that, and he has said that. I think he said it today. But I do think that there's an argument to be made that she's going to be there for a long time. So you want to make sure that the person. There are some people who are against her.
No,
So-
that's okay, but 6 months? I mean, it's not like they're still researching her. They just need a vote.
Yeah, 6 months is a hockey season. It
Yeah.
can't possibly take that long, and we'll have to end on that note. We'll take a quick break, but don't worry, when we come back, we have even more potluck for you, including my own. This is the Daily Wrap, and it's only on Newsmax TV from a still way too cold and windy New York City. And welcome to the Daily Wrap. I'm your host, Joe Conchin. If you're just joining us, we're in the middle of our potluck, where we're sharing our favorite stories of the day, and we're already at my turn. Look at that. Things seem really bad at fraternities across the country, don't they? Yes, and last week in Norman, Oklahoma, that was a dramatic pause, by the way. The Oklahoma chapter of Sigma Alpha Epsilon, otherwise known as SAE, is shut down. 2 of its members expelled after a vile and revolting chant about who gets membership into the fraternity and who doesn't based on color. And you've all seen the clip already, so I'm almost glad that we didn't give it any airtime any more than it deserves. Then on Tuesday, the news hits about a fraternity at Penn State taking photos and video of young women naked, drunk, and passed out. So, is America's fraternity system now full of horrible human beings who don't deserve to belong on campuses of higher learning at all? Do they suddenly all act this way? The answer, once again, goes back to what I'm holding in my hand right now. If we could come back on me, people. This is a phone. Right? Is it a phone? I guess. Well, I rarely get calls on it whatsoever outside of my wife. Nope. This, actually, is a high-definition camera and satellite uplink, all on this little iPhone right here. I can take beautiful HD video and photos and share them with the world instantly. Now, I've been to plenty of fraternities in my day, even lived in one with my room, a triple, okay, which is kind of cool. My roommates were never there because I had girlfriends off campus. Perfect. So I had this whole thing to myself, and therefore more space, and it featured a full-length bar that I actually built from scratch. True story. Anyway, I witnessed plenty of hijinks along the way. But if you want to chronicle someone doing this, and this was back then, this is the 90s, it went on something called videotape. It couldn't be transmitted or shared unless you put it in a machine somewhere. There was no instant uploading to Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. You could share, you know, a moment like this.
Frank!
Hey, honey! Hey!
What the hell are you doing?
We're streaking! We're going up through the quad to the gymnasium!
Who's streaking?
There's...
Yeah, same. You couldn't film that unless you actually took the videotape and gave it to a news organization or something. Or, you know, something out of Animal House. Let's, yes. Yeah, so climbing ladders and being you know, my point is, bad stuff has been happening on campus forever. There have been disgusting racist chants. That's always happened. It just never was captured. Women have been subject to photos and videos they would never approve of being taken. This doesn't justify that behavior whatsoever. There is a line between streaking or being a peeping Bluto, as we saw with the late John Belushi, and what just happened at Oklahoma and Penn State. But what used to stay secret or hidden or destroyed will now be available for all the public to see. And we're going to be seeing it again and again and again in the next couple of days, weeks, and month alone. And it's all thanks to these. Anyway, we're low on time, but
So short
just
response,
quickly.
I think you're absolutely right. We are not getting worse as people, but the stakes are getting higher. Now we've got to resist the temptation, because this is also the world's greatest library in the world. This is perhaps the greatest tool for democracy in the world. It's like everything else. Technology always outpaces the ethics we need to guide it. So when the printing press first came out, yes, it was for the Bible, and a few of those got sold. You know what the biggest industry in printing presses was for like the first generation? Pornography. The technology always outpaces the ethics we need. We can't be afraid of the technology. We just have to acknowledge the stakes are raised, and we've got to live up to them.
Wow, see, you guys won't be able to you know, outdo that. So, did you ad-lib that, or you actually
Totally.
write that down? Wow, you're good. Okay, Heather,
As long as you think so.
let's get to your potluck.
I think it's actually Brad's potluck.
It's actually
Brad,
me.
I'm sorry.
There we go. No, it's no problem. Talking to my own time, so it's okay. It's NFL linebacker Chris Brown, who at the age of 24 is retiring. And he's walking away from about $500,000 in compensation, which is not huge by NFL standards, but for most of us, not bad. And he's doing it at 24. He's not a gazillionaire on his own. He's doing it because of the possibility of brain injury. And he wants a different kind of life. And I'm not criticizing either way. I'm a football fan. I'm proud to be a football fan. Go Bears. But it turns out that there are ethical questions about this sport, and does football really have a future? And who is the one to make these kinds of decisions for us? I'm really not sure. I think the great thing about this story is that rather than legislating from the outside, you have a ball player publicly declaring what he thinks is appropriate for him, and because of his personal choice, invite us to ask these questions.
And there was an article in the Washington Post today talking about, will football go the way of boxing, where suddenly there aren't enough players and there aren't enough good players to really fill the fields anymore in rosters. And here's a dilemma that I run into at home. I played football. I won a state championship at Wayne Valley in 1989. Yay, look at that. But my wife said, our son will not play football. And that's it. And she has the final word. He's playing soccer, tennis, golf, anything that's non-contact. Anyway, quickly, guys, I'm sorry.
Malcolm Gladwell talks about this quite a bit, and he thinks football's a moral abomination. And I do think that's an overstatement of it, but he has a lot of great arguments in some of his articles about this particular issue.
That's true, and I'm sorry, right, that we couldn't get you. So anyway, that's all the time we have for Potluck this evening. When we come back, it's yay or nay. This is the Daily Wrap, and it's only on Newsmax TV. And welcome back to the Daily Wrap. It's time for Yay or Nay. Well, the 2016 election is still well over a year away, but you wouldn't know it. But that hasn't stopped politicos from guessing who will be the nominees for each party. And for Democrats, it seems to come down to Hillary Clinton or Elizabeth Warren. But what about Al Gore? Since leaving the office of vice president in his failed attempt to win the Oval Office back in 2000, he has expanded his world well beyond politics. We all know about his environmental work, and he's also written several books as well. Earth in the Balance, that was a bestseller, and serves on the board of Apple as a senior advisor to Google, and at the mega venture capital firm Kleiner, Perkins, Caulfield and Byers, and 70 other names. So, which could help him financially in his campaign, clearly. So, what do you guys think? Al Gore for president in 2016. Bradley?
Nay. Simple nay.
Perfect. Heather?
I think it would be interesting. He brings a lot more to the table. He also has a lot more baggage. The whole divorce thing, too. And, there's just a lot that people against him would be able to dive into, and people for him would be able to use to support him. Yay, why not?
Well, it's not going to happen. So, I mean, look, the polls today make it just crystal clear, email scandals or not, Hillary is so far ahead of anybody else, it's ridiculous. I mean, it would take something just who knows what to hold her down. She's 45 points ahead of the next closest candidate,
I'm a nay as well. Mr. Gore, here is where it all falls apart. If he runs on climate change and the environment, all I have to do if I'm a Republican challenger and say, didn't you own Current TV and you sold that to Big Oil, otherwise known as Al Jazeera, for $500 million? Game over. So I think Mr. Gore is smart enough to know that. Okay, next. Take a look at this.
What do you need a fake ID for? So I can vote.
And that's from the Breakfast Club that came out 30 years ago. And I think we could all agree that teenagers' brains are not yet fully developed, as Brian's from said Breakfast Club. Some scientists argue that human brains aren't fully developed until we're in our 30s or 40s. Exhibit A. Wow. At any rate, a lot of responsibility is given to teens between the ages of 16 and 18, like driving, gambling, joining the armed forces, and even voting. Well, that last one might change a little. San Francisco now looking to change the voting age to, get this, 16. San Francisco Supervisor John Avalos believes allowing kids to vote at 16 will stimulate their civic involvement that will stay with them throughout their lives. But most teens just aren't that interested, involved, or even aware of politics. In 2008, the largest youth voter turnout in history, only half of 18-year-olds were registered to vote, and about 21 million Americans under the age of 30 did not vote at all. Shockingly, 2 cities in Maryland already have a voting age set at 16, and the voting age was already lowered from 21 to 18 back in 1971. So now I leave all of you with this question. Should the voting age be lowered from 18 to 16, Mr. Unger?
I'd like to know what the experience has been in those 2 cities in Maryland. I didn't realize that there were 2 cities that had
You learn a lot on this
16.
show.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I think it's worth a try. Obviously, the problem is going to be it's San Francisco. It's a very Democratic city, and Republicans are going to say you're just trying to bring more Democratic voters in because kids tend to do it. I get that. Maybe they are. But it'd be kind of interesting to see how they vote. They're probably more engaged than a lot of grown-ups I know.
Would it hurt to go from 18 to 16? Is the mentality really all that different?
Well, I do think the mentality is all that different between 16 and 18, and I do think that there's reasons for it that aren't necessarily all that
we do let them drive.
Passionate. No, right, but we don't let them serve in the military. We don't let them smoke. Right. We don't let them drink.
So you're
I'm a nay.
You're a nay.
I'm a nay too, and I appreciate the motivation. I think part of what Rick you're getting at, right? And I think that the idea of creating greater civic engagement hugely important. But at some point, you're chasing them. If we want to increase civic engagement among teenagers, as a parent of a couple of those, I know what to do. Actually, have better politics. Let politics be credible, so our kids actually believe they had a role to play, and then they'll be eager to vote at 18 rather than begging them to vote at 16.
Okay, and I am an A as well under the what he said rule. So good job.
Hey, you're all a bunch of old fogies.
Boom. So, speaking of lazy Utes, in the words of Joe Pesci, a new study by the Educational Testing Service found that American millennials are falling behind in basic basic skills, but sure, let's let them vote. ETS compared the literacy and numeracy skills of millennials from 22 different developed countries, and the results for America were bleak at best, even though U.S. millennials are highly educated, meaning many have a college degree or higher. They are passing through high school and college without acquiring, basic skills necessary for many jobs today. 50% of U.S. millennials scored below the minimum standard of literacy proficiency, with college-level American millennials on par with high school-level students in Japan, Finland, and the Netherlands. Only 2 other countries scored worse than the U.S., Italy and Spain. About 2/3 of U.S. millennials failed to meet minimum standard for understanding and working with numbers, ranking dead last among 22 countries. You get the idea, guys, so this is a very quick one now. Are millennials prepared to take over, yay or nay, quickly?
Not as well as they need to be.
Heather?
Yeah, a lot of work to do.
Agree, but they never were. We all know people who came out of college who couldn't write a sentence.
And I am a nay as well. Besides, robots are going to do everything, so they really don't have to know anything. Anyway, that's our show for tonight. Great panel, A-Team, thank you. And we'll be back tomorrow night, 6 p.m. for more Daily Wrap. I'm Joe Concha saying bye-bye.